Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare.
All right. Real joy to be back. We have, we got a little message from Venerable Tubin Children, actually. Some of you may remember one of our students, Stacy Stein, is a nun, and now she's Venerable Munlum, and she's at Shavasti Abbey. So she let Venerable know that we're using this text. And Venerable Tubin Children was really delighted. I mean, one of the big goals of putting this whole series of text together was that it, with the hopes, would be shared in Western Dharma centers. So she's really delighted that we're engaged in this approaching the Buddhist path. So that was fun to get a word from her as well, and Venerable Manlam as well. For those of you who don't know her, she's a young nun that has been radiant at Shavasti. She went and she did all the preparatory stuff, stayed there, and went out and back in the world. Do I really want to be a nun? Not, back and forth, and did all the things that you would do to know for sure and put in the time. And now she's actually giving some of the Bodhisattva breakfast talks. And it's great. It's great to see her online. And she's just radiant, looks just radiant. And then the other news is we'll have the monks from Ganden Chartse here in June. And so we'll have a salmon doll in the round room here. Those of you online, if you can make it out here, it'll be June 23rd through the 28th. And we'll have a salmon doll during that time. We'll have a week's worth of events and activities. I do want to get a little planning committee together here to help out with the various things that we do with them. So that'll be a lot of fun as well. So if you are interested in being on the committee, send me an email. All right. With that in mind, let us move on to mind training. We are in this text approaching the Buddhist path, and last week we did the first verse of the 8 verses of thought transformation of mind training, Lojong practice. Lojong's the Tibetan for these genre of teachings, and these 8 verses are just pith instructions on how to transform our life into the path of Dharma. So let's get right to it. Whenever I'm with others, I will practice seeing myself as the lowest of all, and from the very depth of my heart, I will respectfully hold others as supreme. Nothing to it, huh? Oh, you just read that and it's kind of cringy, isn't it? What? And so this one always, for me, when I engage with teachings on this verse, is just have to cut through a lot of misperception. The idea of being the lowest of all has nothing to do with low self-esteem. And in fact, in order to engage in this verse, we need to have some really self-worth. We have to have value to recognize that others have so much to offer us. It's hard to be open to that if I'm insecure. So there's not an approach of low self-esteem or low self-worth. It's actually quite the opposite. So I just want to give that precursor, and we'll see what His Holiness and Venerable Tubin Children have to say. I actually haven't read this yet. I was busy cooking soup for the potluck. So we'll see. Building on the instructions in the first verse to see all others as precious, the second verse points out that our arrogance is an obstacle to doing this. Love and compassion are based on seeing others as worthwhile and respecting them. These virtues are unbiased and go beyond the ordinary attitudes of cherishing those who help us and feeling pity for those less fortunate. The foundation of impartial love and compassion is knowing that we and others are equal in wanting happiness and not suffering. I thought I did. Apparently, I've been told by the people here that I didn't share the screen. Technical error by me.
They're right, John. You didn't share the screen.
You're always there for me, Mark. Okay. So we have to, right off the bat, remember the first verse, seeing all others as more precious, and really recognizing them as they're actually how we achieve anything is because of others. And so in this context, we engage in the second verse. And the baseline is equanimity. The baseline is everybody's valuable. Everyone has Buddha nature. We all are trying to find happiness. We're all trying to avoid suffering. Some of us have more karma and kleshas that are heavier and are suffering more than others. Some of us have received a little more care, a little more instruction, a little more nurturing than others. And so does that make someone better than or more fortunate than? That's a important piece to understand here, but fundamentally, we're all in prison. Some of us just have a little better prison cell, and it's the prison of our conditioning. It's the prison of our habits. It's the prison of, just the simple thought that I just can't do what I want mentally. I mean, isn't that, that's kind of shocking. I just want to be like that. I just want to pay attention to this, and I can't. Well, just want to be perky today, and I can't. Why? So we have this conditioning, we have this prison. And so recognizing that we're all in this, but also fundamentally that everything we have in our life is because of all these others. Every little thing, every thought, every ability to use a word because of countless others. So having that as a baseline helps with this understanding that the foundation of impartial love and compassion is knowing that we and others are equal in wanting happiness and not suffering. So you can see that here's the goal. Okay, but I may not be there yet, right? There might be a couple people that rub me the wrong way a little bit, somewhat. And the idea is, well, here's the goal, though. Here's where we want to go. But we need to begin where we are. But that doesn't mean you throw away a goal just because it seems far away. It says, no, this is doable. To remedy our arrogance and partiality, we practice seeing ourselves as the lowest of all. So now this becomes a skillful method. This must be understood in proper context. It does not mean denigrating ourselves, or succumbing to low self-esteem. Thinking that we are worthless certainly cannot lead to compassion for others. So that's just core. We've really, a self-critical mind, a denigrating mind is an afflicted mind. So not going to help. Seeing ourselves as lower is done in relative terms. In general, human beings are considered higher than animals because we have the ability to distinguish virtue and non-virtue and understand the long-term results of our actions. Whereas the ability of animals to do this is limited. From another perspective, however, we could say that animals are superior to human beings because they kill only because they are hungry or to protect their life when they are personally threatened. Whereas human beings kill for sport and pleasure or when caught up in an ideology or wrong views. This verse encourages us to cherish others and appreciate their good qualities. When we invite guests to our home, we respectfully regard them as supreme. Prepare a delicious meal for them, which we're embarking on today in the spirit of the second verse. In our workplace and family life, we respect those in leadership positions. Similarly, here too, we regard others as supreme, regardless of their or our social status. When greed, hatred, and arrogance overwhelms us, we usually act without restraint, often in ways that we later regret. However, cultivating the thought that others are valuable and that we are just one among many people enables us to curb this behavior. So, this is, again, everything here in these verses is cutting through the root cause of our suffering, self-cherishing, obsession, really. And so all of these really work on this I'm better than, more important than. Now, if I can start to recognize that everyone I'm talking to knows more about certain things than I do, that's a good starting point. I can do that. Everyone I'm talking to knows something I don't know, right? They're superior in that way. Might know how to fix something I don't know how to fix, but had experiences I haven't had. They might be a better artist than I am. I doubt that, because I can do stick figures been doing that for years. But some people, have some talent in that area that I don't. Some people actually think they can dance, better than, and so what if I start there? Everyone I meet, can teach me something. Well, that's a nice entry point. So on one level, there's an opportunity to, as I engage with others, recognize that also they're like me, and they have conditioning, and they have potential anger, resentment. They may do malicious things. And now they have opportunities to teach me other things, what not to do, see the damage that gets done. Sometimes our teachers will also show us our mind, how quick I can be to judgment. So when I kick this up a notch, one of the methods here is, I see the Buddha nature in others, and I hold the thought that they're showing me my mind. And some people can really show some pretty bad spots in my mind. And in that case, they become very beneficial. And it said that, Buddhists can take many forms. And so, kind of a view is to say, what are they here to teach me? How can I learn from them? And then have an opportunity to really see both the suffering and the role models as I engage with people. With that framework, then recognizing these people, some very, doing very malicious things, some doing very kind things. People have done kind things, have done malicious things. People have done malicious things, have done kind things. A lot of people are in between. Sometimes like we're just sitting here. Hopefully this is a virtuous thing we're doing. But other times we're not doing much. And other times we're flipping somebody off on the highway or whatever we're caught up in, or things that we've done. It's important to recognize that's not who anybody is. Okay. I shared this at Tuesday morning. This is a podcast, so it will be out there in the world. But I've done harmful things. Okay. I've nearly killed some people on purpose, and so I know that mind. Without getting into details. And when I look at someone else who's doing that, how am I judging them as a terrible person or a person who was just like me? And that person also has Buddha nature. That person also has capacity for change. Everybody's changing. What direction that goes, we don't know. So in my case, for me, I might have an advantage having done some, some harmful things that have been brutal, and then, much kinder now, and more capable now. But if we look at our lives and we recognize that we've all done things that we don't feel good about, we've also done things we feel good about. How fortunate we are to be here today. And others have not received that opportunity yet. And by opportunity, I don't mean it's not been offered to them. The opportunity to be capable of receiving it. So when we talk about a rare and precious human birth, favorable to Dharma practice, there's these qualities. And one of them is the ability to be interested, to be receptive. And there can be some big walls there. All of us, that are here today weren't always receptive, right? Things happened and they softened. And so recognizing that some people are in a really deep, dark prison of conditioning that even when offered an opportunity, are incapable of receiving it. So it's not that they're a bad person. They're a person who's trapped in this conditioning. But that doesn't mean they're permanently there, right? I couldn't receive it earlier. I like to say that in my own life, I honestly have not met a human being that doesn't want to be a good human being. I've said that a million times. I haven't met all 8 billion, so I don't know, But of the ones I've met, but I have met a lot like me who just didn't know how just yet. And so all of that gets lost when we're going in our day-to-day stuff, and so-and-so is a jerk and they're an idiot, and those people, those political views, and and we just have a caricature and we just stick it as though that's who they are, as though that's permanent, instead of that's how they are in this moment. Or that's how they are a lot of the time, right? They tend to show up that way a lot, And but a thing to play with here is if I alter my attitude towards them a little bit, how will I experience them differently? And then the tricky business is there's a relationship here about how I'm perceiving them. It's not just they're a jerk. It's like, oh, I've seen these other qualities about them. It's not a jerk. Or I've seen these other aspects. Or I've had compassion arise because I see how much harm that they've done and that they've had. And then that's a different mind to hold. In which case it's giving rise once again to the understanding of the depths of conditioning and karma and klesha and issues that come up. And so understanding I have a lot to do with how I'm experiencing them. Doesn't mean what they're doing objectively. There's some people objectively doing harm by killing, murdering, mayhem, taking the last piece of cherry pie without sharing. Some people are doing some real harm in the world. So how do we deal with the actions in ways that are more skillful in understanding the very nature of the conditioning, the struggle, in a way that is not, that actually empowers me rather than diminishes me? And so therein lies the key, because liberty, freedom, the liberty to have some option around how I get to experience life, this freedom is not going to arise out of anger and hatred and judgment. It will arise out of wisdom, understanding, discernment, and compassion, loving kindness. And loving kindness and compassion have boundaries, have accountability, and skillful methods. Without anger and hatred, that label that sticks. So the second verse is really, just cuts right to it. Is how can I learn from others? How can I see them as teachers? How can I respect their Buddha nature, not their actions? And as you can tell, you could, probably just talk about this could be kind of hard sometimes. So I'm just going to pause there, see if anyone has any thoughts or comments on this particular verse. If you're online, just unmute, dive in there. Rita's got a hand up.
Yeah.
This is your favorite verse, right?
John, I'm just curious how you say like we this and we that, but do you still have these demons rise up? Like, to what extent do you still like do you get angry, or do you feel like what afflictive emotions do you still feel, and what causes those in you?
Yeah. When somebody takes that last piece of cherry pie without sharing,
Okay.
there's some stuff there. You notice I worked that in. Yeah, no, I am not an enlightened being. What I can say is, things about rage or, things that's very rare that I experienced anything like that anymore. Agitation, judgment, sure. The big part of this, and I think people miss this in the Buddhist practice or just human life. You don't have to be a Buddhist for this. Actually, you don't have to be a Buddhist for anything we've said. Is the idea that I shouldn't have those feelings, right? That's a problem. Having feelings of agitation or judgment or frustration or anger or even hatred, having that arise is not the problem. It can be a problem if I don't think I should feel that way. Because now who am I judging? And how am I limiting myself? Now I'm creating afflictions. Having anger, hatred, irritation arise is part of a human experience, karma regulation, these things happen. The key is, what do I do about it? Now I'm engaged. Those feelings or thoughts or things arising in my mind are pretty ethically neutral. What I do about them is no longer ethically neutral. How do I respond to that? Now I'm creating karma or conditioning or habits, however we want to label that. And one of, I think, the holes that people dig themselves in is thinking that they're bad because they have the thought or the feeling or the experience, as opposed to, no, that's normal. And, it's pretty cool. I didn't, sock them in the face today, right? Like, how did I respond? And therein lies the new future here. What seeds do I plant? Now, over time, as you recognize that no one out there is the cause of your anger, guess what's going to happen less? Again, you're not going to get angry as often. So, the more you recognize that anger's here, not there, and actually, really recognize that as a realization, you just get angry less because there's no place for it to arise. It's not out there triggering. And so, but that's a much longer journey, right, of engaging in practice, but also understanding the nature of dependently arising experience, what we call emptiness. And so, but as you do that, and that's where, there's a very fundamental premise that all these mental afflictions arise in dependence upon misunderstanding. Well, that's the Buddhist main core point. So if you have less misunderstanding, there's no way you're going to get so frustrated. And so these, I know that you also participate in the mindfulness program, and we have these 3 misperceptions. So if you work with those all the time, which is one of my core practices, I noticed over all these years that I've never found a time where I'm angry where it's based in reality. I just haven't. Might happen someday, just haven't found it yet. And so having done that, then what's happening is you live more in reality. Those you don't get triggered as much. So I do not get triggered as much as I used to. And in general, I do not act out in a negative way like I used to. I've made improvements. And but the key point, I just need people, or I would like people to hear, is don't beat yourself up for having anger, hatred, and resentment. That's just digging yourself a hole. Note the anger, resentment, and hatred. And then we have these antidotes, right? We've listed those antidotes. We have the first one, be like wood. If you can't, you just don't do anything, right? Till you can calm down. And then, ask the big question, how do I respond? And then if you have time, it's really nice to journal and investigate where that anger and hatred came from. And then we get to see about our own sort of judgments, views, belief systems, and so forth. And as you unravel that, you remove, wisdom is what cuts through all this. But wisdom comes with the experience and really taking some time with the 3 wisdoms, right? Learning about it, contemplating, analyzing it, and then meditating on it. And so that's the ultimate piece. But the first piece is stop thinking you shouldn't get angry. Let's just start there. Might still happen even after this talk. It could still happen.
Do you ever get angry at the same thing over and over for years? Like, isn't that wouldn't a person feel stuck and start to judge themselves if they just can't quit being angry at the same thing, even if they're not acting on it?
My suggestion would be, how do we engage with that differently than we have? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So sometimes if I have the same habit, then I need to look at how am I working with it and maybe adjust my strategy.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Chris.
I was just gonna say, there are gifts of anger, right? Gifts of fear, gifts of sadness, right? And so, some anger can be like the information that I need to change something in my life. So, stepping out of the victim role. And I would say anger that's, prolonged oftentimes is resentment, which means you haven't acted and you're not, creating change. Sometimes, anger gets anger to be wisdom, right? It can be, you're gonna be proactive. So I really like you said that all emotions are neutral. I mean, some of them are more difficult and more uncomfortable, but none of them are necessarily bad, and they do come out of the human condition. So I really know that the idea that you have emotions is good, and then what is it, what is it informing you to be more proactive in your life?
Mhm.
So I like to look at it.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And I'm not sure if everyone heard that online, but Chris was reiterating a point. I like the word gift, right? These emotions can be gifts. If we, when do you go to a doctor? When you're feeling great? Or do you go to a doctor when you have an injury or an illness? Likewise, these emotions can let us know, as Chris is pointing out, they're a gift in that they let you know what needs to be worked on, maybe, or how I need to engage differently. And some of the more difficult ones will really move us to do some really different kinds of work, and they inform us. So it's kind of like, if I get a knee injury, it's telling me an emotion can do the same. So we can really view that as a real gift of wisdom, of understanding. What's always relevant is how am I engaging with it? There's books and stuff, destructive emotion. And they become destructive, not because the emotion, right, but what I'm doing with it. Almost sounds like you're a therapist or something.
Yeah, something like that.
And but so often people will really get on themselves for getting angry, thinking they should be further along, thinking they should be different, instead of, and so back to that same pattern. If I keep getting angry at the same thing, how about I stop worrying about getting angry at the same thing and not give it all that energy? Oh, that's just anger arising. I don't need to get in the car and go down the road with it. I mean, I have found that can be sometimes a pretty interesting strategy. Oh, can you believe I still get angry at that? Wow, that's interesting. And move on. Sometimes that's other times, as was pointed out, deeper work, resentment. What am I carrying? What is the judgment? What's the wound I haven't healed? Yeah. Lots of ways that we work with these things. But to beat ourselves up for having them, I just haven't seen a benefit there. Mark.
Yeah, John, this second point here reminds me of, one of the things that we often say in 12-step programs is that the newcomer is the most important person in the room. And over the years, I've come to appreciate that more and more. And recently, I've been sort of experimenting with this by just when I go to a meeting, to think of myself as the lowest person in the room, to really, get my attention up and listen to everyone. And oftentimes I often say that my sponsees teach me more than ever I teach them. That I learn more about recovery and life from them than I do just from reading or thinking about it. So yeah, and it's very helpful. It's liberating because it frees me from having to judge others or do all that stuff, or it frees me from feelings of inadequacy or feelings that someone is attacking me. I remember one time I used to think that somebody's share was directed to me when, now I know it had nothing to do with me at all. So yeah, in a way, taking this posture is really helpful and it's a kind of liberation from all of those, afflictive thoughts and emotions and all of that.
Yeah, thanks for putting it so thoughtfully that way. These verses are actually for us, right? I mean, they're beneficial, but a Western mind reading that I'm going to be the lowest of all doesn't sound very beneficial. but what a liberation when I get out of that, as you just described. You're much more free. Yeah, it's really helping us.
I like what Mark said. I think that really helps me understand what this verse is all about. And taking this attitude not as, being the lowest person in the room as the sort of put down. It's more of letting go, having the ability or the aspiration to let go of my self-cherishing long enough to see the value in others.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's more, maybe there's a little bit of a loss in translation here as to how we can understand this verse, but it seems like, maybe just allowing ourselves to let go of our self-cherishing long enough to pay attention to others might be what we're getting at here.
Yeah. The thing to remember is that so much of our struggle and all that is really around insecurity, around us not knowing we're valuable. And then we get into the judgments, and then we get into the divisions, and then we get into, all that. And this opportunity to recognize, it just struck me once. I'm trying to remember, was it Jitsuma? Probably Jitsuma. Who just said, you have no less Buddha nature than the Dalai Lama. That's, and neither does anyone else. There's no less. He just knows it more, right? And I, know it less, and it's just obscured. And all of these things are actually helping us recognize our Buddha nature ultimately. And what's blocking us is a lot of insecurity and, what we call sort of this ego that's clinging into, people need to see me in a certain way or be like this. And it's cutting through that allows that recognition. And so this is actually a very selfish practice. But His Holiness would say it's a wisely selfish practice. And there's so many approaches to it. But it is trying to cut through that self-grasping, self-cherishing. That's really based on insecurity. Because once we know, that we're okay, as Mark pointed out, there's freedom. There's a lot of freedom. You can learn from anybody. Got a few more minutes. Somebody else out there have a thought, an idea, comment? A pithy statement.
This whole discussion kind of brought up something I've been thinking about over the last few weeks. You mentioned at the retreat, what do we do with feelings? We feel them. And I guess for me, and probably for a lot of people, it's I don't think I'm accustomed to just feeling a feeling without having some sort of critique of it. So I'm hoping that I can remember to kind of go into analysis mode or investigation mode will maybe help me with that. And then along those lines, I've found lately that there's certain situations where feeling arises of anger or frustration for the most part. And I say to myself, boy, I am really sick of feeling this way when this situation comes up. And it seems to be a little bit helpful because it's at least motivating. And I don't know if it's, if there's a certain amount of self-criticism in that, or if that's kind of a healthy, I'm kind of over this. I'm tired of this. I'm not really sure where on that spectrum that being sick of having the feeling lies and how helpful that attitude is. If I can, maybe tweak that a little bit and make it a little more constructive. Or if that's, you know, a reasonable and healthy thing to feel in order to motivate me to move on.
Yeah. No, that's, I think, exactly what Chris was pointing out, that it can motivate you to change, right? I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I don't want to be angry. I don't want to be like this. And then there can be a real inspiration to change. And so that can be really healthy, as long as you're not beating yourself up about it. It's like, and so, as you said, sometimes just feeling the feelings, I don't need to do a whole thing on it, but I can be sick and tired of being sick and tired and then want to do something different. And then I'm motivated to engage in some things differently. And I think, as Chris pointed out, that's certainly how it's played out in my life. I don't want to feel like that anymore. I would like to do something different. And so the sneaky thing that Jetsuma will point out is a lot of people come to her about dealing with anger and hatred, but nobody's coming to her talking about their greed and attachments. So the harsh ones are much more motivating, and the other ones are sneaky, right? I don't want to be angry and pissed off, but I still want all my stuff, and she, that's the sneaky stuff. So these, these feelings that we don't like are very, gifts, as Chris said, that can really help us be motivated to change. But there's that the finesse, or what we call skillful means, is knowing that I don't need to give it energy. Still there. Wow, I still act like have that pop up. Or I'm tired of this. I'm going to do something different. And so these are the journey, right? Which ones are repetitive patterns and are representing an unresolved trauma or an unresolved issue, and which ones I just keep giving energy to that I don't really need to. And so so that's kind of this human experience we get to figure out a little bit. Anybody else?
Would you repeat everything that we missed, please?
Absolutely. It will be repeated on video and on podcast. You can play it as often as you'd like. Thanks for that, Kurt. All right. Well, yeah, we're at the top of the hour. So what I'll invite people to do is start working with this verse this week. And again, see the value in others, recognize that they're important when you're dealing with them, and see if we can't see them as a teacher in some way. However, meet yourself where you're at. It could be pretty hard to think of myself as the lowest of all, right? That wording might not even be very helpful, especially if I'm struggling with my own self-worth. But maybe we enter it with, everyone has something to teach me. Well, okay, everyone has some value. So we start there maybe, and that everyone knows something more than I do. And just on a side note, they asked the Dalai Lama this, it's like, you're supposed to see everyone as being better than you. I mean, do you ever struggle with that? I mean, because, like, you're sitting next to her, it's like, what's the Dalai Lama thinking about that with you? And is it ever hard? I think they asked him, is it ever hard to find that thing? And his Dalai Lama, he's pretty quick. He says, yeah, sometimes I think they have really good hair. Oh, yeah, they got really good hair. So sometimes we need to dig a little bit, but usually we can find a way. All right. I will pull up our dedication here. What a gift it is to be with all of you tonight. And again, so this will be the verse we work on for the week, and then we'll discuss it in. Well, we then get into the third one next week. But having gathered here today with each other and for each other and supporting each other in this process of cultivating loving kindness, compassion, wisdom, these qualities of freedom, we've, in the process, cultivated a great deal of merit. And so here we have an opportunity to dedicate the merit, the collective merit, for the benefit of others, that they may find their liberation and for our own continued growth and understanding. So let us dedicate. By this merit, may I soon attain the enlightened state of Guru Buddha, that I may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.
Om